ancient road south. Welcome back to our 7 Churches pilgrimage. I'm Rob from Through Eternity Tours. We've seen Constantine's relics in the Pope's Cathedral. Now we're walking the ancient Appian Way where Romans buried their dead for centuries. Today's challenge, longer distances, underground catacombs, and the road that built an empire. Ready to go underground?
Here we are about to walk on to the ancient Appian Way, the first of the consular roads. He was a council member, Appius Claudius Caecus. He was also the guy who built the first aqueduct of Rome. Again, remember, 4th century BC. Now, we also have the ruins of the baths of Caracalla that were built in the early 200s during the reign of the Emperor Caracalla. And there were a lot of public baths in Rome, but these ones, to define them, were the most luxurious, the most beautifully decorated. Now, right from here is the Appian Way, the ancient Appian Way, and that's also the Via Latina. So remember, those are 2 different types of roads. Roads, one for a destination, and one that's built as a consular road that would eventually get us all the way to Puglia and have us take a port to go to Greece. It's how we started. All roads lead to Rome. Here's what we have is something that's rather interesting, is that we have one arch right after the other, but this wasn't a triumphal arch. This is the arch that was built specifically to support the aqueduct that brought water to the baths of Caracalla. Now, right after it, though, we have, again, one of the gates, one of the most important gates of Rome. And it was a gate, what we call now the Porta San Sebastiano, because it would lead us walking out on the Appian Way eventually to what is our 5th destination, St. Sebastian, outside the walls, and also where they have the oldest continuous catacombs in the city, Christian catacombs. Andiamo! You guys all know how I love the walls of Rome. I keep on talking about them. Well, here there's a museum that's for free that you can go and visit it. It has very specific hours, and you can walk along and check out the walls themselves, and you have stunning views of the countryside of Rome, right up at the top here of the Porta San Sebastiano. In 68 AD, Nero was persecuting the Christians, and Peter and Paul were part of those persecutions. Peter had almost escaped these persecutions by walking out on the ancient Appian Way. It is right where this church is, right here, where he had a vision, and Jesus appeared in front of him, and he states out to Jesus, and he says, Domine, quo vadis? Meaning, oh Lord, where is it that you're going? And Christ says to Peter, I'm going back to Rome to be crucified again. So Peter understood that he had to go back to Rome to be crucified. But he specifically said, I do not want to be crucified in the way of my Lord. They granted his wish. They crucified him upside down. Now, as the image of Christ disappeared, his footprints remained. And so the church was built where this miracle happened. Further down the road, at the Church of St. Sebastian, they have the footprints of Christ. So here we are, the 5th of the 7 churches of Rome for the Jubilee, St. Sebastian's. Right in front of the beautiful facade, you can check out this church. And one of the most interesting aspects of the church, besides the relics of the footprints of Christ that are here, the arrow of St. Sebastian, is the catacombs themselves. Now, these are probably the first catacombs, and in the Middle Ages, when people were terrified to go out in the countryside, and most of the catacombs were forgotten or lost, these were the only ones that were opened up continuously for the Christian faithful to come and visit. So we also have some beautiful statues in here. One of them happens to be the last bust ever sculpted by Bernini. It was rediscovered later. I mean, within the last 20 years, they've defined it as something that he did when he was at 78 or 79 years old. It's Christ the Savior of the world. And then also St. Sebastian himself. Now, he was a person who was a soldier, part of the Praetorian Guard, who protected Diocletian, and he criticized Diocletian for persecuting the Christians. He had converted himself, and Diocletian then said, all right, tie him up against a column and have him killed by being shot with arrows. And then there was a widow who healed him, and then he returned and criticized Diocletian again. He was beaten up with a bunch of sticks or beaten up with a bat. Strangely enough, he supposedly was an older gentleman, but then later on during the Renaissance, with this desire of depicting almost naked figure besides Jesus, he started to be painted and sculpted. And inside this statue is almost, one could say, a very sensual, scandalous depiction of Saint Sebastian as he was laying in rest after he had died, but it almost looks like he's sensuously sleeping, almost waking up. What I really love about Saint Sebastian outside the walls, one of the reasons why it's so special, is that it is the only church extant that we have in Rome still standing that is one of these circus form churches. What does that mean? It means that it was built to be in the shape of the Roman circuses, like the Circus Maximus or the Circus of Nero, taking something of an ancient Roman competition and making it triumphal. Perhaps it was a covered cemetery for the Christians. We're not necessarily certain. And what we have here today of the church, we see only the central nave. And the side naves are used as part of the visit for the catacombs. You enter in one side, you exit out on the other. They date back to the early 4th century, so right after Christianity was legalized. And then if you can look right over here on the other side, it's kind of reminiscent of what the old church of St. Peter's was, is that we have tombs that were built on the side and attached to it.
Want to descend these hidden underground worlds? Our Catacombs of Rome and Capuchin Crypt tour with transportation takes you deep beneath Rome to discover the secret spaces where early Christians practiced their faith. We handle all the logistics, comfortable transport between sites, skip-the-line tickets, expert guides. Now, we're on the actual Via delle Sette Chiese, Street of the Seven Churches, connecting San Sebastiano to San Paolo through Garbatella.
Well, after walking through Garbatella, a fascinating neighborhood, we get at the base of the hill brought to the beautiful church of St. Paul's outside the walls. This is one of the major basilicas. It's our 6th church today, and a church that was completely burnt down and rebuilt in the 19th century, and probably of all the churches, probably the one that is most similar to the old church of St. Peter's before it was rebuilt to what we see today. Let's go inside. I was just looking up for a moment and I found so many people that really have affected the way the city looks today. The Baroque popes, and they're right up here. So we start out with Paul V. Paul V did the façade of St. Peter's, the Borghese family. Urban VIII, the Barberini family. We have Alexander VII, the Chigi family. These popes, and there aren't that many of them, there's about 5 of them are what we consider the great Baroque popes. And so much of what Rome is Baroque is because of these popes right over here. The reason this church was constructed, and it kind of reminds us all of what happened with Notre Dame in 2019, they were doing repairs on the roof and someone left a torch on and the entire church burnt down. They had to set up a huge funds to gather enough money to help build the church. So it took many, many years to rebuild it, and finally when it was done, it was considered a sensation. And I always love it because in some ways I think it's a very spiritual church and very reminiscent of what the old basilicas of ancient Christian Rome were. This is probably what St. Peter's used to look like before it was torn down.
From secret catacombs to St. Paul's tomb rebuilt after a devastating fire, we're now 5 churches into this ancient pilgrimage. If this underground journey amazed you, smash that like button and subscribe for more Hidden Rome content. Next time, the final approach to St. Peter's through neighborhoods tourists never see. We'll cross the Tiber, pass an ancient Egyptian pyramid, and complete this 25-kilometer journey at Christianity's most famous basilica. 1 episode left in our Jubilee series. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the grand finale at St. Peter's. The best is yet to come.